Guitar World Magazine, author and podcaster Brad Tolinski. Absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Guys, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on.
It's always cool when somebody wants to actually hear what I have to say.
I'm your host,
Absolutely.
Kevin.
And I'm your co-host, Brian.
But yeah, Brad, I know you got a new book coming out, or maybe it's already out. You mind telling us a little bit about that, just to get things kicked off?
Yeah, I appreciate that, guys. Actually, we just announced it officially about a week ago, so you guys have a bit of an exclusive. I haven't really talked to anybody too much about it. It's a book called Blow by Blow, and it's the Jeff Beck story. And Jeff Beck, like in the Rolling Stone magazine's top 100 guitarists of all time, was like number 5 behind like Jimmy Page and
Wow.
Eddie Van Halen and people like that. So Jeff's interesting because he's never been like a superstar on that level, because he played more instrumental music. He sort of kept a low profile, but the book is a lot about how he just carved his own path, and just really stayed true to his to his muse, to his spirit. And I trace his career all the way from, the guy started innovating guitar in the early 60s. He was in the band called the Yardbirds.
Oh, yeah.
And the Yardbirds basically, some people think that they created heavy metal, they created psychedelic music. He was doing like Eastern influenced music before the Beatles did it,
Yeah.
First guys to play fuzz guitar and through big Marshall amps. And
that's a different kind of band.
Yeah. And then he progressed. He got into a whole interesting funk jazz thing during the 70s. And Blow by Blow was like one of the few instrumental records that actually was like a top 5 record, and recorded at Motown and did all sorts of cool stuff there. And then he just kept on going through his career. And his final record that he did was actually with Johnny Depp on vocals and guitar. And a lot of people don't know this, but when Johnny was running into all of his problems with his with his wife and this very public divorce, he basically hid out at Jeff's house in England for like about 6 months, and they just worked on creating music and put out a record.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Was it the fact that he was a bit of a undersung hero that kind of made you want to do a book on him?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a regular thing I do on Substack, and I really like, Substack. There's a lot of great writing on there, a lot of great writing about music. But to be honest with you, people seem to always talk about the same like 5, like really, I love the Beatles, but really like how much can you,
Can you go over it and go over it?
And Jeff is cool because, people dug him. He maybe not as famous to the youngsters or something like that, but,
Right.
Had an incredible career and was considered by many to be, the greatest rock guitar player of all time. But yet, not his story isn't really known, and it's a really cool, interesting story.
And who they don't really talk about either is Peter Green. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yeah,
From Fleetwood Mac.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I played the famous Les Paul, the famous Peter Green Les Paul at one point. Peter Green is a fascinating figure too. But the thing is he had his his 4 or 5 years. Jeff Beck had a 60-year career. I mean, it was 60, and he kept on going. And at the end of it, like I said, he was still remaining, pretty contemporary. He did this record with Johnny Depp, and people heard about, knew him through that. So yeah, and his story hasn't been done 3 million times.
Right.
But he is, in a weird way, like a Forrest Gump character. I mean, again, he started in the 60s with the Yardbirds, which also at one time had Eric Clapton playing and Jimmy Page playing in the band. And he was one of those guitar players, and had a bunch of hit records. And then had another band with Rod Stewart, got Rod Stewart's career launched. And then, just kept on going and evolving and becoming a better player. But he just always was doing his own thing. And he was, didn't seem to care about pursuing like being the biggest in the world. It was more about his artistic vision. And I like guys like that,
No, that is a great point. Sometimes people don't necessarily want to be in front of the spotlight. They just love doing what they do. And it's also great that you mentioned like you're covering like guitarists who they have an extreme amount of talent, but they're not necessarily as well known, because just like sports or anything, people always pick like the top 5 hot people and they just go over them over and over again.
Michael Jordan, LeBron James, over and over.
Yeah. And I don't know, it's like, I love finding new things and interesting things. And I don't know how much you guys know about King Crimson, but
big fan here. Big fan.
Yeah. Did you
Red? I love the album Red.
Red's amazing.
It's something else.
Did you see the sort of King Crimson revival with Steve Vai playing?
I heard about it. Yeah.
I mean, that was amazing as well. But if you're a big fan of King Crimson, this week on my Substack, I include this story and an interview that I did a few years ago with Robert Fripp and Vernon Reid from the band Living Colour.
Okay.
And this is how that came about. Like, I was talking to Robert about a box set by King Crimson called The Essential King Crimson. And I was just saying, like, who do you dig? Who do you think is cool? What new guitar player do you appreciate?
Yeah.
He just went on and on about Vernon Reid. And to me, it was so funny because, King Crimson is sort of like this intellectual math rock.
Very dark,
austere, like European thing. And for him to love Living Colour, which is like this explosive funk rock music, it just surprised me. So I asked Robert, like, if I can get Vernon and you together, I'd love to hear that conversation,
Right.
And Vernon is sort of awesome too. Like, he's just a great conversationalist, super smart guy. And that's what I did. I basically got them together, turned on a tape recorder, and then they were just like beep, 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 for like 3 hours, and the best out of it.
So you got a lot of content.
Oh yeah. I once I was once hanging out with Vernon, and somehow the Game of Thrones came up, and he did like this half-hour analysis of Game of Thrones that was so deep, it just completely blew my mind, So and Fripp is also, sort of a super intellectual,
very intellectual, yeah.
In the piece, like, I'd say, so tell me about when it's cool to improvise and when it gets to, when it can get too far out for the audience. What considerations do you have? And Robert's like, well, the way I see it, there's 3 different circumstances in which this is allowable. And he goes, he sort of methodically goes through like a college professor of like,
when it's appropriate. Yeah.
When it's appropriate. So you may want to check that out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know, like, these players, they play so organically, but it seems like there's a lot of thought and preparation that goes behind what seems organic.
Yeah. Well, that's for sure. And, part of this conversation that I had with Jimmy Page and Jack White, that it's going to appear in my Substack next week, was talking about how a person takes and updates the blues, which is essentially both of what those guys do. There's a blues foundation, and then they modernize it. And part of the discussion was understanding the music, so well, getting so much on top of it that you can now forget about all of it and just let it flow through you. And they were talking about that the blues essentially is more about setting a mood. It's not about the notes or about the riffs. It's creating a vibe,
What does it feel like? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And there's a really deep conversation about that. And I think that's sort of what you're talking about, is you have to go so deep in order to get that level where you sort of forget about it and just let the music flow. And that's what the greats do that. And there's no short
the top of the top. That's what they're doing.
Yeah. There's no shortcuts,
Exactly. Like, when the greats do it, it just seems like it's easy, but for them to make it look that easy, it required countless amounts of preparation.
Yeah.
So you were able to talk to so many different guitar greats. Like, what are some of the other big takeaways that you've come across in regards to playing the guitar and just being good at it?
Well, I think that there's different ways to be great at the guitar. Like, I think if your goal is to just, learn a bunch of tunes and to be able to go out and play cover songs or go out and entertain your friends and all that stuff, there's that approach. And that's, really challenging. And I don't look down on that. And the people that can do that well are a lot of times great musicians. And I know many that are. But the guys that we tend to be interested in, what they do is they synthesize different things. I mean, I'm as you guys are asking me these questions, I'm thinking about my Jeff Beck book. And what the interesting thing about Jeff is, he started out being like a rockabilly fanatic. And he learned like every rockabilly lick, that he could find, Gene Vincent, all this stuff. And he sort of ran into a dead end. And Ian Stewart, the pianist, this guy that was one of the earliest pianists for the Rolling Stones, then turned him on to a bunch of blues records. And he had never heard this stuff before. And it just blew his mind. And he started somehow fusing this weird rockabilly technique he had with the direct energy of the blues and came up with something new. And then was listening to Eastern music, Ravi Shankar, sitar music, music, and said, what would happen if I put a little of this into it? And then all of a sudden you come up with something new, with something
that no one's heard.
And to me, that's what the great guys do, right? They they learn from other people, and you always have to learn from other people. But then they start mixing in something, and that's when it becomes interesting. And,
Yeah, for me, like top of the
sorry.
top for me, like with blues, I think is Peter Green. I think, when he was at his height in maybe 1970, there's no one that ever could really come close to him.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, a lot of people feel that way. I mean, you know, B.B. King, for example, isn't just a great guitar player. He was a student. He loved music and loved the blues and really consumed it and had this incredible record collection that went all over the place. And he thought that Peter Green was the man.
There you go. Yeah.
So
because like a lot of people like Eric Clapton, but he's a bit different. Peter Green's a bit more raw, I think.
Yeah. Well, Peter Green has a beautiful tone. It's sort of the tone that he got. And those guys, a lot of those early guys, they didn't have foot pedals and everything. It was just literally guitar into amplifier. And what's cool about that is that you have this direct line, the most direct line between the fingers, the string, and the speaker. And so what you're really hearing is the human, as close to the human.
Closer.
Emotion. Yeah. And it's sort of funny. I went up to 5150, Eddie Van Halen's studio, and he had this huge, console up there. And there were
what do you have, like a SSL or a Neve, something like that?
Yeah, he had like an SSL board, but he had it all sort of disconnected. And he said, what I hate about all of this stuff is all the stuff between the guitar and the tape. So I've just disconnected all this digital crap from it and have created this something where I go as closely as I can directly from my fingertips onto the tape. And what the other interesting thing was he had his classic Marshall amp sort of set up in his studio, and his like little, I don't know if you call it a trick or whatever, but almost like a joke. It'd be people invariably say, can I plug into the Marshall? Because the Marshall was it's like this holy grail amplifier. And he'd be like, sure, here's a guitar, plug it in. And he'd set it to how he set it, which is just, not all on 10, but very healthy sound. No pedals, no nothing, no master volume, none of that junk. It's just like into this amp. And you start playing his guitar, and it was like wrestling with a wild bronco. It'd just be like, and he said, you don't know how to control this, and he'd have it. And again, it would just be, the fingers to the strings to the amp.
Just like a raw force.
A raw force.
Talking about, yeah.
Force. So, Peter Green, to me, and the early Eric Clapton, they have this beautiful direct sound. But to me, I think what they do is a bit different than what the traditional early blues players did. They're a different generation. It's a different thing. And, I'd put Eric up there. I'm a huge Johnny Winter fan. I don't know if you are familiar with Johnny, Texas guitar player. I think the greatest white blues player ever. But I don't know, man. You listen to Muddy Water, and you listen to Buddy Guy, and there's something wilder and rough and more direct. And it's a little harsh for people these days to listen to it because it sounds crude. But man, right. I don't know, I can feel it. So, it's hard to say, who's.
And then vinyl, just listening to something on the actual record, like we're talking about, it's more, you're closer to that rawness with, a 7-inch or whatever.
So what are you guys listening to now?
I listen to a lot of jazz, actually. Bill Evans Trio. I don't know if you're a fan.
You want me to drop
like
some
modal, modal jazz.
I just finished up a project with John McLaughlin.
Oh wow!
Who played with Miles. All during that
the fusion
and modal period, and he worshiped Bill Evans. He has a fantastic record.
Wow.
His guitar interpretations of Bill Evans music, and that, again, I hesitate to drop that name because I don't know if people are that familiar with John, but
right.
Boy, if you listen to Miles Davis record like Tribute to Jack Johnson and hear John play, or the Mahavishnu Orchestra, that's wild stuff, man.
Wild stuff, yeah.
It's so good. Yeah.
I got turned on to that by a guitar teacher. I've been teaching drums since I was 18, and the first guy who gave me a shot at his studio, he said, I'm gonna hip you to some stuff that you never heard. And he's showing me, King Crimson, Mahavishnu Orchestra, Gentle Giant. Yes. He hit me to all of this 70s prog rock. And it really just blew my mind because before that, I was just listening to, like the Beatles or maybe some jazz, but I had never really heard prog before. So that totally, and then I found King Crimson through him, and they're, Bill Bruford on drums. I've always kind of idolized him as a player. I feel like he's in that top 5 if I were to, rank drummers. Him, Nick Mason, Pink Floyd, obviously. Those are 2 definites. But
Bill's snare drum sound. Like that. Nothing like that.
But that was another great point you made about the more of that organic feel, because with music, it's all about connecting with people and emotion. And when you digital, it smooths things out. You can get a pleasant sound, but you don't necessarily connect with it as much. And I think, now music is becoming increasingly more digital to the point that you're not even listening to the artist as much as you're listening to auto-tune or, what pitch correction software.
Or like beat correction, quantize, everything's gridded out, all the drums.
I don't even hear it as music sometimes, because my ear's so tuned into it that it feels like, I try to educate myself. I'm not like one of those guys that says like, if it's modern, it sucks, Right. I do like a lot of modern music. But I can hear the digitalness in the sound, and it's not appealing. It doesn't, it hurts me like almost physically to listen to some of the auto-tune stuff. I can hear it immediately. Just like when I read other writers, I can see when AI has taken over their writing.
Oh yeah.
I won't name names, but I had a friend of mine who was writing a thing for Substack, and I started noticing like the AI writing a little too much of his stuff, and I called him up and yelled at him.
And what are you doing?
Yeah, don't do that. Don't go down that rabbit hole.
Go down that road. Yeah, right.
I know it's sweet and it's slick, and it edits it and everything, and it's seductive. But give me the bad shit too, man. I want to hear the rough and tumble, a little bit. Gotta have the rough and tumble.
I think that's one of the main things that's missing from more contemporary, more current artists. Everything, all the drums are quantized. All the vocals are pitch corrected. So you're getting this like perfect painting almost, but like you're saying, you can hear you could hear the cracks in it. You can hear where it's like, okay, this is too perfect. I'm not even processing this as music right now because it's quantized drums, pitch corrected vocals, and the works. So, because I remember one studio I was recording at, the guy said, look, any album that comes out of my studio is quantized. Because I was like, no, I don't want you to beat correct the drums. I don't want that grid sound. And he said, no, anything that I produce has to be quantized. He was firm about it. This is years ago, but I feel like a lot of people have that same viewpoint about, more modern music and how it should sound and the way it should feel. And I've kind of always, battled against that no, like don't quantize my drums. I want to hear the take. I want to hear how I was feeling in that moment. Because a lot of that is cut out when you do all this digital stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I have a bizarre story for you. And I think it plays.
Love to hear it.
I think it sort of plays into this a little bit, into this discussion. So I'm going to bring it up. So when I was a kid, I played in. I had this band. It was a super experimental kind of band. It was I play guitar, but I also play violin. And the band was me on electric violin. We had 2 keyboard players, a bass player, and a drummer.
Wow.
And I played some guitar, but it was mostly that. And we were making pretty experimental music. I was living in Detroit at the time. And this guy.
What year is this?
We're really talking about the late 70s.
Late 70s. Okay.
Yeah. So this guy came up to us and said, I want to record you guys. And so we did this recording up in a 8-track studio up in an attic somewhere. And we printed 500 records. And it was pretty strange music. It was under the influence of that whole King Crimson-y kind of progressive rock, jazzy, Mahavishnu.
Kind of like British.
With a little bit of weird, classical influence as well. So anyways, we did this record, and I always thought it was cool and interesting and what have you. But we did 500 copies and it went out into the ether and the band broke up, blah, blah, blah. So now about 10 years ago, I started getting phone calls from people saying, hey, were you not asking me about, being at Guitar World for 20 years. They were like, hey, were you in this band called October? We've heard bits of it, or, it began taking on this weird cult following.
Oh, wow.
And people were asking me, if we had vinyl, and,
right.
I was like, oh, sorry, dude, whatever. I might have 1 or 2 copies somewhere. So about 6 months ago, I get a call from this French record company who said, we want to put out your record. It's gotten on such a thing. And I'm like,
wow,
dude, yeah, what? You want to put out this thing that I did in a freaking attic years and years ago. It was amazing to me that somehow it survived. But I do feel like and they are putting it out. And
Oh, wow.
what's really funny is that we had recorded like a bunch of more material that never got put on that record, that the producer was going to put out another record. And it turns out he did put out another record and sold it overseas. And it went out on 3 different record labels in Europe. And I never even knew it came out. And so he's like, "Oh, we want to put out your other record with it." And I'm like, "What other record?"
What other record?
And so I just found out this other thing had been floating around in the ether. So anyways, they're putting out both.
Did you get a chance to listen to it? The
it was good. It was good.
It was good stuff. Yeah.
It was good. But what I want to say about it was that it was put together by human beings. Believe me, it's not perfect. It's certainly not fucking quantized. When I search my soul and think like, how has this weirdo thing that I did in an attic like 40 years ago, how has it survived? Why has it survived? And people,
why has it survived? Yeah,
yes.
That's a great question.
Yeah. And listen, I think it's good. I don't know if it's a work of genius or anything, but I think it was quite good, especially we were just kids, doing it.
Right. And this was you on violin?
Yes, me playing violin and some guitar stuff too.
Okay.
But mostly violin. And I think it's because it was weird stuff done by human beings that people they still have a desire for that.
They still connect with it on some level. Yeah,
it's not, it's not perfect, and it's a little challenging. And, I think people are getting a little sick of just hearing machines make music.
The same stuff over and over and over, and it's all perfect.
I think what's missing from the digital music is the story and emotion, because the AI doesn't have feelings, it doesn't have emotion, doesn't have that creative spark. So the machine is generating the music, then that's missing. It might sound kind of pleasing to the ear, but the story, the feeling behind the music is not there. And I think that's what's missing in music created in that form or fashion.
Yeah, and they're having to go back fucking 40 years to some like punks in Detroit to figure. What are you listening to?
I mostly listen to like a lot of 70s, 80s music, like funk. I don't know if you know Willie Hutch, Isley Brothers.
Of course,
Isley Brothers. Yeah.
Let me see who else. I like jazz fusion too. Like the Crusaders. I don't know if you heard of them.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, dude, like I said, I mean, I live in New York now, but I grew up in Detroit. Oh. And so it was Detroit, Michigan in general was such a hotbed of all sorts of music, really interesting musical activity, including, techno was first out of Detroit.
Oh, wow.
And, a lot, R&B is basically in my blood, that's the radio stations there were half R&B, half rock and roll, so you were listening, you were getting all sorts of things. But getting back to the Jeff Beck book, my new book, it's coming out in July. July 15th, but you can get it now.
Right. Make sure to get a copy of that.
All right, guys, you can get it now. You just heard.
Amazon, right?
Yes.
Okay. Amazon.
But Jeff, that's what happened to Jeff. So, you had all these guys, these fantastic people like Peter Green and Eric Clapton, and all of them were in that blues rock space. And Jeff was like, I don't want to be doing what those guys are doing. I want to go someplace else. And Jeff was a huge R&B funk guy. And his music often gets called, jazz fusion. But really, when you get down to it, Blow by Blow, his biggest record, it's really a funk record. I mean, there's no question about it. And I talk quite a bit about that in the book with Jeff. At one point, he's like, you know, I just don't want to be doing what everybody else is doing, you know, and that music isn't speaking to me, and I want to go in this other direction. And he hears Jack Johnson by Miles Davis with John McLaughlin on it, and he also is just like a huge fan of you know, all the R&B stuff, you know, coming out of Memphis and Motown. And actually, at one point, which is a sort of a funny part in the book, like Jeff's like, I don't exactly know what to do, you know, as my next move, but I know I love Motown music. And if I could just maybe, and I love the sound of Motown studios, I'm going to go and record there.
Oh, wow.
I don't know what's going to happen, but I want to go and record there. And,
Let's see. Yeah.
And use, like, I keep on trying to imitate the Motown house band and I can't imitate it. So why don't I just use the frickin' Motown house band?
Why don't we just go try it out? Yeah.
Why don't we just go there? And they go to Motown, and they're one of the first artists that is outside of like the Motown staple to use the actual studio. And they get in there because their producer is, you know, friends with somebody over at Motown. But anyways, Jeff gets in there and he thinks he's going to go to Motown and record like he does at some of these other studios, which is you get in there, you jam with the musicians, you come up with some ideas, da, 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 da. And so Jeff goes in there with his drummer, Cozy Powell at that time, and says, okay, let me get James Jamerson. Let me get, you know, Benny Benjamin. Let me get some of these great Motown musicians. And we'll just get there and jam and we'll put this together. So, of course, he doesn't understand that Motown has a completely different culture than where he came from. At Motown, you got your charts. You know, you had everything sort of set up ahead of time. And this idea of coming into the studio unprepared and just wanting to jam was a huge incident.
That's more like Miles Davis. You know, you go in, bitches brew, and, you know, in a silent way. They would say that on some of these sessions, Miles he would not let them hear anything until the day they stepped in the studio. And then he's like, okay, go write this piece in F sharp or whatever. And then they'd have to come up with something on the spot. But he did that to get that realness out of these musicians.
Mm-hmm. But the thing is Jeff just thinks, okay, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to do this. And of course, they all ended up hating him. And he just has like 2 weeks of it's just pure nuttiness.
So it didn't work. It didn't work out.
It didn't work. He ended up recording, you know, a bunch of tracks, but he just didn't like the results. And I was like a little skeptical of that. And I knew that the tracks existed. So I was able to chase down a couple of the engineers, the original engineers that were at the sessions at Motown for the book, and ask them what happened. And they're the ones that told me, you know, all the conflict. And
oh, wow.
And they just said, look, it just didn't, you know, Jeff didn't sound good either. You know, he didn't have the right amp, and, you know, it was just a totally foreign way of recording for him. And I was a little skeptical. And then one of the engineers slipped me some of the session.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't.
How did it sound to you?
It wasn't very good.
It wasn't very good.
But anyways, after that, Jeff put together a couple of really great, you know, funk bands, and you know, recorded them with Steve Cropper in Memphis, and, you know, some really cool stuff on those records.
So now, what do you think? You know, now we're kind of talking about a little jazz fusion and stuff like that. What do you think about a drummer like Tony Williams, who, you know, he was 17 years old when Miles Davis brought him into his group?
one of the greatest musicians of the 20th century.
Yeah. No, he's like him, Elvin Jones, and Art Blakey. That's like my top three.
Yeah. Yeah. Tony's extraordinary and
indifferent. He struck me as he was doing his own thing. He didn't really care what else was going on. He had his sound and he was loud as hell.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm working on a book right now, finishing up a book with John McLaughlin. And it's a different kind of book. It's not like a narrative like Blow by Blow, Jeff on DiCapo. It's going to be an art book of John's sketches of all these different musicians that he's worked with throughout his life and his memories of them. And I'm helping him sort of capture that and shape those stories. So
that's interesting.
He talks about Tony quite a bit and how radical he was and how incredible he was to play with. And John was right there at the beginning of that period,
like the Tony Williams lifetime.
John played in Tony Williams' lifetime.
Oh, he did? Okay.
Yeah. And show you how different times were back then. John was considered within his circles, he's a British musician, like one of the more advanced guitarists. But he didn't have a lot of money, and nobody was making a lot of money. And they brought him in from England to New York to play with Tony and to play with Miles. And he couldn't afford his own electric guitar. So he borrowed an amp, and then he took an acoustic guitar and put a pickup on it. And a lot of that early John McLaughlin stuff that you hear on the Lifetime records is John playing an acoustic through an
Really?
Yeah.
That's different. Yeah, I mean that Lifetime stuff, it really sticks out as its own thing.
It's so exciting.
Like what's it called? That track, $1 Million Legs.
Oh yeah.
Just like that, just driving, and I don't know. Yeah, Tony Williams, he's really hugely inspirational for me. Other than that, than the jazz guys, I love, Pink Floyd, Nick Mason.
What about Nick? I mean, what is it about that you like is his sense of space? Because he's almost the polar opposite of Tony Williams, who's all over the place. Nick is like boom, 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 ba-da-ka-da-boom, that kind of thing. But no, is that what you love about it? Is that sort of
his time, so like with drums, I teach feel. Mm-hmm. So feel or groove, however you want to look at it, that to me is what speaks to me and has always spoken to me through records. Like if we're going to go back to Coltrane, A Love Supreme, there's a certain quality on that session that you get when you listen to it. You're getting that, like we're talking about before, that rawness that's being cut out now and perfected. You used to have that. And I think maybe some of these younger people are starting to realize, hey, some of that 90s stuff was a lot better than the stuff coming out now. And some of that 70s stuff was a lot better. I mean, me and Kevin realized that, but I think a lot of younger people are starting to wake up and realize, no, we don't have to quantize, beat correct every single drum part. Not everyone needs to sound like Maroon 5. Like it's kind of ridiculous what they've done with the quantizing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're replacing everything now. They're not just quantizing this. They're basically just, sampling this
sound
stuff.
Replacing. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so every time people say, well, why is the older music last longer? And I think part of the explanation that maybe a person that isn't an instrumentalist, maybe they can understand this. So, as a drummer, even though you try to keep your hits even and keep, there's an art in that. It's still going to be different every time you hit it.
Every time. Yep.
Every time.
Every
and
time.
That tickles the ear in a different way, right? It makes it constantly interesting, right? And
that's what I love about jazz, the improvisational approach. I mean, we on this show, we even take a jazz improvisational approach to the podcast. Partly, part of the reason is I'm so influenced by jazz and improvisation when it comes to drumming. I think it kind of spills over into my life here.
I don't play drums, but I'm a drum fanatic. I don't think you can have a band without a good drummer. Anytime
That's what they say. You're only as good as your drummer. That's the saying.
Yeah, and you can get away with a lot of shit if your drummer is good. You know what I mean? It's sort of like if that guy's holding time together and you have.
That's the thing. It's just like it doesn't matter what you can do, how flashy you can do it or spin it. Can you keep that 4/4 beat going? Can you keep those quarter notes even? Can you keep the bass player in check? Can you keep the guitarist in check, the vocalist? Because that's really, if you look at it like a grid, okay, drums are at the bottom, then bass is laid over the drums, then maybe keyboard and guitar, and then vocals last. So it really does come down to that root level of the drummer sets the tone. And that's something I've always enjoyed about drums. It's kind of like Buddy Rich said, being the drummer is sort of like being the quarterback of an NFL team. Everything kind of goes through you. You're the centerpiece in a way. And that always spoke to me in terms of drums.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's like, people take it for granted, I guess, about guitars, like you're going to go into a room and the guitar player is going to sound different than the next guitar player. But the same is also true with drummers. And, there's something so beautiful about a drummer that can play well and can tune their instrument, and the instrument sounds beautiful. And I've had, again, the good fortune not only to be sort of up close and personal with guitar players, but, to be in cool rehearsal spaces and stuff and hearing all the instruments.
Right.
And, Chris Layton, who played drums for Stevie Ray Vaughan. Dude, if you sat next to Chris Layton, who is not a flashy drummer, but he's solid. But if you listen to how beautiful his drum set sound, like next to him, like that dude knows how to tune a drum kit, and it's fantastic.
And the thing with tuning drums is that my old teacher told me this. He said, every drum has a sweet spot. So you can tune that drum to anything you want to, but fact of the matter is there's a sweet spot. And if you can get it to that sweet spot, then you're kind of in the money.
Yeah. I was in this other really interesting situation with a friend of mine, Andy Alidort, who's a great guitar player. And he does a lot. He did for many years a lot of the transcriptions for Guitar World, but he's a great player in his own right. And one of his specialties is like he can basically play just about anything that Jimi Hendrix can play.
Okay.
He's done all the transcriptions for the books and everything. And I was actually in a studio where the Hendrix family hired him to do a tutorial on how to play Machine Gun by Jimi Hendrix, which is one of the most devilishly like, I don't even understand how you copy that, because there's so many things going on, but he could do it. And in the studio, they had Buddy Miles, who played on the original Band of Gypsies, be the drummer.
Right.
And Eddie Kramer, who was the engineer for Jimmy, was engineering the session. And why is his name? The bassist, Billy Cox, was there too. But Buddy Miles' drum kit, dude, it was just so amazing sounding. And his technique was so cool, because it wasn't like, it was a lot of wrist action, right? So, he would just hit the snare and it would just be like, and it wasn't like some weird reverb thing. And it was just
Right.
the way his drum sounded. And he was just like, and you were just there and you're like, I could just listen to this. I mean, fuck it. Fuck the rest of you. I'll go off. I'm just listening to this.
Yeah.
A 4/4 fucking groove, and I could listen to that all night.
Yeah,
There's
drums.
those
It's
guys.
really there's something very personal when it comes to a drum set. Like I had an acoustic set for a while. I don't have it anymore because I moved from LA back to New York, kind of in a whirlwind very quickly. I had to leave all my equipment, or 99% of my equipment had to be left in LA. But I had a Yamaha Maple Custom kit, and I tuned that thing to the sweet spot. And people used to always come up to me and they say, man, like, how do you tune those drums? How does it sound so good? I'm just like, you just got to find the sweet spot. That's, the wisdom that was passed down to me from my teacher.
Yeah. So who was who would you say had the best drum sound, like, that you've ever heard, that you were in the same room with?
That's tough to say. I mean, who would you say?
Me personally?
Yeah.
There's a couple of guys. I mean, I did talk about them. I mean, Chris Layton's drum kit. I was just hypnotized. Just the beauty.
I mean, I think someone like Nick Mason, there's a unique, when you hear Pink Floyd, there's a certain sound that you expect to hear almost, or especially on the wall. The way the drums sound on the wall is iconic in a way.
Yeah. One thing that sort of stood out to me, and mostly because I don't know why, it shouldn't have taken me by surprise, really. But I was lucky enough to be invited to a Van Halen rehearsal at like an SIR studio.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I love the sound, but Alex Van Halen has a much more distinct sound. Like when he started playing, I was just like, holy shit, that's that sound, right?
That's it. Yeah.
You were like, wow, that's not like that sound. That is that.
That
sound.
is it.
That is that fingerprint. That is it. Sound.
Yeah.
And
that's part of what's missing now, is that you put a record on and you have no idea who the drummer is.
Because it's a robot.
It's a robot. It's a machine. Like, you just have no idea. But if you put on vinyl, put on a Pink Floyd record, or, Jimi Hendrix, you're gonna be blown away. You're just like, wow, this sounds organic and real, and there's a warmth to it, which I think that's what's lost on when you take the music and digitize it or whatever. The vinyl it's much closer to that raw image, like we're talking about earlier.
Well, getting back to the attitude is different these days, I think, for young people when they're learning how to play music, than it was in my age. Now, I could tell you about my band October and this weirdo record that we made, and this strange thing where we had 2 keyboard players, violin, bass, and drums, which is an odd setup.
Unique. Yeah, it's unique.
It was unique, but that was rewarded back when I was a kid. Like the idea in the 70s, and I'll even say the 80s, I was in another really unique band in the 80s, but in the 70s, if you didn't have something different, if you weren't creating something different, you were penalized for that. Like you were expected to come up with something new and to be different. And
look at someone like Prince. It's like, yes. Whoa, you're taking about like, this is different. This is really different.
And these days you're penalized for being different. I mean, there's exceptions to the rules, and I think that there are some cool performers and some cool bands out there. But I think by and large, we are sort of like a lot of people are conditioned to like, you should sound like this. And like and if even they aren't conditioned to be like that, you have somebody like the one engineer producer you were telling me about saying, it must be quantized. It
must be quantized. Anything coming out of my studio is quantized. It's like, what? Like, really, dude? Like, yeah, you're going to do this to my drums? But, that's...
Or they just replace it. I had
or they sound replace the whole thing. So then you're really listening to a machine and not a human drummer.
Another interesting story, I guess this is sort of reminding me of, I had a cool chat with John Mayer. This is probably good, maybe 5 years ago now. But I was talking to him about, digital amplification and versus, tubes and blah, blah, blah. And
right.
And he made the point, which I think was absolutely correct and true, is he goes, I've got all these fabulous, Dumble amplifiers and these, tube amplifier, these rare things. He goes, but they're almost useless. He goes, because you go into a studio and they have you can bring your nice tube amplifier and you can play through it. But then they also run the signal through, some kind of direct amplifier, some software amplifier. And he says, 9 times out of 10, they will take the signal from the digital amplifier because the analog amplifier will not sit in the mix properly with all the other digital amplifiers. So you're also being conditioned to some degree by just the norms of what's happening in the studio these days. I mean, he wasn't against the digital amps. He wasn't being like, snotty about it, but he was just saying that to him, that's a new reality.
Amazing, man. We're at the top of the hour. Before we get out of here, we need to get your Substack, and where can we buy your book, and where can we best connect with you at? And can you leave our audience with any closing thoughts?
Oh, thanks, guys. So I have the Substack. I've been enjoying it. I've only been doing it for about 20 weeks now, but I've been having fun communicating with so many new people directly with it.
Nice.
And it's called Guitarland.
Okay.
Or you can find it under my name, Brad Tolinski. And I have a lot of cool stuff up there. It's not just interviews with musicians, but I also have a lot of guitar history up there if you want to know, when and where the first fuzz box was being made or the first Marshall amp. I have Substacks on that, as well as, interviews with, all the cool icons, but, for many years, I was the editor at Guitar World. A lot of people know me from that. Was there for 25 years. But lately I've been working on books, and, I have several, depending on what you're into. One is what's called Play It Loud. You're seeing it backwards, but that's Play It Loud. And that's sort of the history and the sound and the revolution of the electric guitar. So, if you wanna really, and it's not boring, I'll tell you, there's a lot of really fun and interesting stories. I did a book a couple of years ago about this great Detroit band called the MC5. The first, I'd say the first political punk rock band ever. And you may know them from the famous song, Kick Out the Jams, Motherfucker. They were like one of the first bands to use the word motherfucker on a record and got penalized for it. Chased out of the business, so to speak. Yeah. But the story is fantastic. And they were real revolutionary people, not only in music, but very involved with the politics of the day. And a great story about how they dealt with the police in Detroit, who weren't the nicest people. And I have a couple of books with, one is Eruption, which is my conversations with Eddie Van Halen. If you're an Eddie Van Halen fan, you will hear everything that you ever wanted to know about Eddie Van Halen in his own words, with only mild amounts of me butting in. Mostly you hear Eddie Van Halen. And this Light and Shade, which is my conversations with the great Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin. And you guys all know about that. But this is my new guy. This is coming out officially July 15th. But it's available now, Blow by Blow, the Jeff Beck story. If you're into cool guitar stuff, like from the 60s on through the funk of the 70s and later fusion and experimental music that he did in, all the way up until the 2000s. He was doing all this like wild techno music with guitar playing over the top of, all these techno producers and stuff.
Oh, wow.
And you know what? Like everybody out there, if you read all of that stuff, that should keep you busy for a while. You can reach out to me through my Substack.
Okay. And I hate to have had to cut that conversation short because I felt like we were just getting started. So we have to have you back and dive more into all these amazing stories you got for us.
We didn't get to kind of dive into the whole Pink Floyd thing, your talks with Roger Waters. I would definitely be keen to hear about that.
Brilliant guy. Yeah, I spoke to Roger 3 or 4 times. We always seem to hit it off. And David Gilmour as well, on a couple of occasions. Yeah, so let's do it again sometimes. And
we'll get you back and we dive into some of the stories we didn't get around to. And
it's always a pleasure to talk about drums.
Oh yeah,
I like talking about drums. I'm a
drums.
I can't play them.
Teaching.
I can't play them, but I love great drummers.
And like we're talking about, if it's tuned properly, then you get the full impact.
It helps.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. We'll catch y'all next time.
All right, guys.
Okay. Cheers.